I still remember the smell of those early mornings. Coffee brewing in the old kitchen, gospel music humming low from the radio, and the faint warmth of sunlight crawling across the curtains I sewed myself. Back then, life wasn't fancy, but it was full. My name is Marian Ellis, and for most of my life, I was known as Tamara's mama. That was enough for me. Being her mother was the proudest title I ever carried. We lived in a small town just outside Atlanta, the kind of place where everyone waved from their porch and every neighbor knew who baked the best sweet potato pie. I worked as a school secretary for nearly 25 years, and my husband, Charles, was a postman who never missed a day's route, even in the rain. Our little house was modest, 2 bedrooms, creaky floorboards, a leaky faucet we never got around to fixing. But it was ours, paid off penny by penny. Tamara was our only child. From the day she was born, I swore I'd give her every chance I never had. She was sharp, determined, and had a sparkle in her that made people listen when she spoke. Even as a little girl, she dreamed big. Bigger than this small town could hold. She used to sit by the window looking out past the oak trees saying, "Mama, one day I'm going to make it so you never have to worry again." I'd smile, kiss her forehead, and whisper, "You already did, baby." Our lives had rhythm. Sunday service, family dinners, the same beat of laughter and struggle. I worked overtime so Tamara could join dance classes, cheerleading, whatever her heart desired. When the bills got tight, Charles picked up extra shifts, and I'd stretch a meal into 2. But we never complained. Raising her gave our lives purpose. When she got accepted to college, the first in our family, I cried right there in the kitchen, holding the letter like it was gold. I remember thinking, this is it. This is what all the sacrifices were for. We packed up her things in boxes labeled in my handwriting, shoes, books, mama's snacks, and drove her to campus in our old blue Ford. The goodbye was hard, but it was the kind of pain that comes from pride. At first, she called every night. We'd talk about her classes, her new friends, her professors. She sounded so alive, like she was blooming in ways I couldn't have imagined. I'd tell everyone at church, "My Tamara is doing big things," and folks would smile and say, "We knew she would." But over time, the calls got shorter, then fewer. She started saying things like, "Sorry, Mama, I'm busy," or "I'll call you next week." I told myself it was just part of growing up, that she was finding her own life. Still, I'd keep my phone close, waiting for it to ring, pretending I wasn't counting the days. When she graduated, we were so proud. She'd become the woman she'd always said she'd be, polished, confident, successful. She landed a job in the city, working in marketing for a big firm. I remember her first apartment. High ceilings, shiny floors, the kind of view that made you feel like the world was beneath your feet. When Charles and I visited, she insisted on paying for dinner, ordering wine I couldn't even pronounce. She was so different, but I told myself she was just growing into her new life. Then Charles passed away. It was sudden, a heart attack that came like a thief in the night. My whole world went quiet after that. Tamara came for the funeral, wearing a sleek black dress and heels that didn't belong in our old church. She held me while I cried, but even in her arms, I felt the space between us. When she went back to the city, she promised to visit often. She didn't. The house grew emptier. The sound of the radio, once comforting, started to echo. I busied myself with church events, potlucks, and volunteering at the library. People told me I was strong, but the truth was I was just lonely. I missed my husband, and I missed the version of my daughter who used to call me Mama with joy in her voice. Now when she called, it was, "Hey, Mom," said quickly, as if she was already somewhere else in her mind. Years passed. I watched her life unfold through social media. Red carpets, business trips, magazine features. She looked happy, radiant even, but she never came home. Each Christmas, I'd set the table for 2 just in case. Each year, the second plate stayed clean. Friends would ask, "How's Tamara doing?" And I'd smile and say, "Busy, you know her," even though my heart whispered, "She forgot me." But deep down, I held on to hope. I told myself that when the noise of her new life quieted, she'd remember where she came from. She'd remember the hands that packed her lunches, the arms that rocked her through storms. I believed one day she'd come back, not for the holidays or a quick visit, but really come home. Still, sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in her old room, the one with the faded posters and the empty dresser, and wonder what I did wrong. Was I too protective? Too proud? Maybe I made her feel small by staying small myself. Whatever it was, it built a wall between us, one polite phone call at a time. I didn't know it then, but life was about to remind both of us what family truly means. And sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what's really been missing.
It started with the small things, little cracks that I tried to ignore at first. A missed birthday, a forgotten anniversary, the way she no longer called to ask how I was feeling or even to tell me about her day. Tamra's life had grown so big, so shiny, that I felt like I was watching her through a window I couldn't open. Every time the phone rang and it wasn't her, my chest sank a little more. I tried to tell myself that she was busy building her empire, that she had obligations and meetings I couldn't understand, but every excuse felt like a brick added to the wall, slowly separating us. I noticed the first real change when she stopped sending me pictures of her new home. She had told me once how she wanted me to see the city skyline from her apartment window, how she imagined me drinking coffee in the morning light while staring at the hustle below. But the photos never came. Instead, I found myself scrolling through her social media, piecing together her life like a stranger, seeing her smiling with friends I'd never met, eating meals I didn't recognize, living a life that had no room for me. There was a pang in my chest every time I looked, not just because I missed her, but because I felt invisible. The first big warning came on a Friday evening. I had prepared dinner, roasted chicken, buttery mashed potatoes, corn on the cob, the way she liked it when she was home. I set the table carefully, lighting a candle for ambiance, hoping she would call and ask to join me. I imagined her rushing through the door, laughing, tugging at her hair as she fussed over the meal. But the phone never rang. The sound of silence in that little kitchen was deafening. I found myself wandering the rooms, half expecting to hear her voice in the living room, calling, "Mama, you won't believe what happened today!" But it never came. Then came the subtle messages, the texts that felt polite but distant. "Busy with work, Mama. Talk later," she'd say. Or, "I'll try to visit next month." I saved them all, reading them over and over, trying to find warmth in the words. But every message, no matter how careful, felt like a gentle slap. She was polite, but I could feel the distance, the way her new life had little space for me. I started to notice how quickly she typed her replies, how short her sentences were, how her emojis replaced real words. Her life had changed, and I wasn't part of it. I tried to push the feeling aside, telling myself it was normal for children to grow apart from their parents. I buried myself in my routines, church events, library volunteering, cooking for neighbors. But even in the midst of these activities, my thoughts returned to her. I remember when she was 5, how she'd run to me after every scraped knee, every fall, every heartbreak. Now she ran somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't reach. One afternoon, a neighbor mentioned she saw Tamra in the city walking past our local grocery store. I hadn't even known she had been back in town. I felt a surge of hope and pain at the same time. Hope that she remembered me, pain that she didn't reach out. I drove slowly to the store, hoping to see her from a distance, but by the time I arrived, she was gone, swallowed up by the crowd. The parking lot felt enormous, echoing the emptiness I carried inside. The first real confrontation happened at a family event, our small reunion for Charles's birthday. I had invited Tamra months in advance, sending her a message carefully worded to remind her of her father's memory. She replied with a short, almost cold, "I'll try." When she arrived, she looked radiant in a tailored outfit, her heels clicking on the wooden floor as if marking her arrival like a statement. She smiled politely, hugged me briefly, and moved on. The meal passed with laughter from everyone else, but I felt like a shadow at the table. I wanted to reach out, to pull her close, but she kept glancing at her phone, tapping her fingers impatiently. I realized then that she had forgotten the intimacy we once shared. The private jokes, the shared glances, the comfort of being just mother and daughter. The cracks grew when I overheard a conversation with her cousin later that night. She spoke of plans and investments as if I had no place in her life. She mentioned trips and events without so much as in, "I wish you could come." I felt the sting deep in my chest, the realization that I was no longer a priority, that our bond had been quietly replaced by ambition and independence. I went to bed that night clutching my chest, trying to breathe through the ache, wondering how the little girl who used to curl up on my lap had grown into someone so distant. Even my friends began to notice. They asked why I seemed quieter, more reserved, and I would just smile, saying Tamara was busy with work. But inside, I was grieving a loss I couldn't name. The child I raised, the one I poured myself into, had drifted away, leaving me to navigate this new emptiness alone. Every room in the house whispered her absence. The laundry folded neatly in baskets reminded me of the small routines she no longer shared with me. Her shoes, once scattered by the door, were gone. The calendar on the fridge, filled with her school plays, doctor visits, and soccer games, was empty, a silent testament to the life she had built without me. Then came the moment that broke me entirely. The day I realized she had completely forgotten me. A sudden illness struck, something I never expected to handle alone. I woke in the middle of the night, chest tight, vision blurry, and reached for my phone, praying for her call, her presence, her concern. But it stayed silent. I tried her work line, her cell, every number I had. Nothing. The house felt colder, the air heavier, as I slumped against the bed. I whispered to the empty room, "Tamara, I need you." And the only answer was the echo of my own voice. It was in that quiet desperation, lying on the mattress in the dark, that I realized the full weight of what had happened. My daughter had not only grown apart, but she had forgotten me in the rush of her new life, her wealth, her independence. The walls we had once built together had crumbled, leaving me outside looking in. And in that moment, I knew that to survive the heartbreak, I would have to confront the truth, not just about her, but about myself, about our relationship, and about the choices we made that led to this distance.
It happened slowly, like a storm gathering at the edge of the horizon, and then all at once, crashing through every part of me. The day I discovered the truth about my daughter, I had just returned from the doctor's office, holding a stack of medical bills that I couldn't begin to pay alone. My hands trembled as I sorted through them on the kitchen counter, the fluorescent light above doing nothing to ease the ache in my chest. I had spent decades saving, stretching every penny to make sure Tamara had opportunities I never had. Yet here I was, alone with nobody to help. And it hit me. My daughter, the one I had raised to reach for the stars, had built a world in which there was no room for me. I tried calling her again that afternoon. At first, her voicemail picked up, the cheerful, automated greeting making me wince. I left a trembling message. "Tamara, Mama's sick. I need your help, please." Hours passed. No call. No message. I began to pace, the wooden floors creaking under my weight, each step echoing the emptiness in the house. I went to her apartment in the city the next day, my heart a storm of hope and fear. When I arrived, the doorman politely told me she wasn't home, and according to the building manager, she had been gone all week on a business retreat. I felt the first sharp edge of betrayal cut through me, not for leaving, but for not even letting me know. That night, as I sat by the window with the lights of the city twinkling in the distance, I felt a mix of anger, sorrow, and disbelief. Memories flooded in. The scraped knees I tended, the sleepless nights I spent comforting her after nightmares, the countless Sunday mornings I walked her to church, arms wrapped tightly around her small frame. All of it seemed swallowed by her new life, replaced by a polished image on social media, glamorous dinners, business deals, awards I wasn't invited to celebrate. My chest ached, not just from the physical illness, but from a deep, soul-crushing loneliness. Then the breaking point came, when I accidentally stumbled across her latest project online. She was featured in a magazine. The cover story celebrated her rise as a visionary entrepreneur, detailing her accomplishments in glowing terms. And there it was, the line that felt like a knife twisting in my heart. In the article, she mentioned her support system, friends, mentors, her business partners. But never once did she mention me, the mother who had sacrificed everything to get her to that point. Not a word of gratitude, not a hint that the woman on the cover had a mother who loved her so fiercely that she would have given her last breath for her. I sat there, staring at the glossy photo on my tablet, tears streaming silently down my face. I thought of all the times I had been there for her. The late nights helping her with homework, the birthday parties planned down to the last detail, the years spent patching wounds, both physical and emotional. And yet, she had moved forward without me. Not maliciously, perhaps, but completely without thought. The realization hit me. She had built a life where I didn't exist, where my sacrifices had been invisible. The days that followed were a haze. I cried quietly in the mornings, wiped my tears before the neighbors could see, and went through the motions of daily life, pretending nothing had changed. But inside, I was unraveling. The betrayal wasn't just in her forgetting me, it was in the way her absence made me question myself, my worth, my role as a mother. I kept replaying our last conversations, analyzing every word, every emoji, trying to understand when the warmth had gone cold. Was it me? Had I failed her in some fundamental way? Or was this simply the price of ambition and independence? One evening, I found myself holding a photo album, a fragile, faded collection of memories. I traced my fingers over the pictures. Tamra as a toddler, first day of school, graduation day, birthday cake smeared with frosting, Christmas mornings wrapped in the magic of our small traditions. Each image reminded me of the life we had built together, the bond that I had nurtured with so much care. And yet the silence from her now made me feel like all of it had been a dream, a story I had told myself to keep going. The emotional weight became unbearable when the neighbor called, insisting I check my mailbox. Inside was a large envelope with a note written in a familiar hand, Tamra's handwriting, elegant and precise, yet cold. It read, "Mama, I'm sorry I can't be there. I'm working constantly. I know you understand. Love, Tamra." The words felt like ash in my mouth. No warmth, no empathy, just business-like formality. The daughter I had raised to have compassion and kindness had left me stranded in my most vulnerable moment. I sank to the floor of the kitchen, my back pressed against the cold cabinet doors, and let the tears fall freely. I whispered her name over and over, a quiet chant, "Tamra, Tamra," as if saying it enough times could summon her back to me. But the silence of the house mocked me, reminding me of the gulf between us. In that moment, I faced the devastating truth. The daughter I loved, nurtured, and sacrificed for had created a world that excluded me. And now I had to decide, would I let this destroy me, or would I find the strength to confront it, to demand accountability, and if it came, forgiveness? And most importantly, I would find a way to reach my daughter, to remind her of the bond we had forged, and to reclaim a piece of the love that had been quietly slipping away. I realized the anger, the grief, the heartbreak were only part of it. There was also fear. Fear of rejection, fear of pushing her further away, fear that the daughter I had poured my life into was lost forever. My hands shook, my chest burned, and I thought about my own mother, long gone, and how she would have held me, whispered that I was enough, and told me that even in betrayal, love could find a way. I held on to that memory like a lifeline, knowing that my next steps would define not just our relationship, but the healing or further heartbreak that lay ahead. It was in that dark, quiet kitchen, clutching a chair for support and staring at the empty chair across from me, that I made a promise to myself. I would not crumble. I would confront the truth with grace and strength. I would seek understanding, demand accountability, and, if it came, forgiveness. And most importantly, I would find a way to reach my daughter, to remind her of the bond we had forged, and to reclaim a piece of the love that had been quietly slipping away.
The day I finally saw her again, I was both nervous and determined. Months had passed since that cold note, months spent wrestling with anger, grief, and the unbearable emptiness that her absence had left behind. I told myself I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't crumble. I would speak my truth calmly, firmly, and without bitterness, though every fiber of my being trembled at the thought of facing the daughter who had built a life without me. I dressed carefully, choosing a soft cardigan and a dress I knew she'd always liked, wanting to show her that even in hurt, I carried dignity. When I arrived at her city apartment, the world outside was buzzing with cars, people rushing by, and the hum of skyscrapers blending into a constant city rhythm. I pressed the buzzer and waited, my heart pounding in my chest. She opened the door herself, wearing business attire, heels that clicked sharply on the floor, and a look that was polished, composed, and almost unreadable. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The daughter I once held in my arms, now standing taller, colder, and undeniably distant. Her eyes flickered briefly with recognition. Then a practiced smile formed on her lips. "Mom," she said softly, but there was hesitation, a gap between the word and the warmth I had expected. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, and felt the hum of the apartment buzzing against the silence that stretched between us. I wanted to grab her, hold her, tell her everything I had carried in my chest, but I forced myself to stay grounded. Instead, I began calmly, almost cautiously. "Tamara, we need to talk." At first, she tried to deflect. She spoke of her busy schedule, the board meetings, the contracts, and the events that had filled her days. But I pressed gently, recounting moments from our past. The nights I stayed awake with her when she was sick, the times I drove her to school in the rain, the hours I spent cheering at her games. I didn't accuse. I didn't yell. I simply reminded her of the bond we had shared, the sacrifices that had allowed her to flourish. I wanted her to feel the weight of my love, to remember the life we built together before ambition had pulled her away. Her composure began to crack when I told her how I had been struggling, how the bills piled up, how I felt invisible in my own home, and how her absence left me lonely and afraid. I watched her face change in real time, the mask of perfection slipping as I recounted the nights I cried alone, whispering her name. A flicker of guilt, of recognition, of pain crossed her features. I could see that the daughter who had once clung to me now understood, maybe for the first time, the cost of forgetting her mother. The conversation turned raw and honest. She admitted that she had been swept away by her new life, the money, the excitement, the social circles that seemed to demand her presence elsewhere. She confessed that she had assumed I was fine, that I was independent enough to handle life without her. And as she spoke, tears began to fall down her cheeks, unrestrained, genuine, and real. I realized then that the person before me was not unfeeling. She had simply forgotten, had drifted, had lost sight of the foundation that had given her wings. I allowed myself to speak, to pour out everything I had felt over the months, the ache, the sorrow, the fear, and the heartbreak. I told her about the nights spent staring at her empty room, the holidays when the second plate remained untouched, the birthdays when her chair stayed vacant. I spoke calmly, but with the full force of a mother's pain, letting her understand not only the impact of her absence, but the depth of my enduring love. For a long moment, we just sat across from each other, quiet, except for the occasional sob or whisper. I watched as she leaned forward, taking my hands in hers, and for the first time in years, I felt her presence, really felt it. It was fragile, tentative, but undeniable. The daughter I had thought lost was here, responding to my truth with remorse and empathy.
We worked through the hard conversations, her missed responsibilities, my resentment, the hurt that lingered. There were moments of tension, of sharp words exchanged quietly, but always tempered with understanding. By the end of the night, we reached a tentative truce, a fragile bridge over months of silence. I could see that she was beginning to realize that love and family are not optional, that no achievement, no wealth, no success could replace the bond we shared. And in that moment, as she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Mama, I'm so sorry. I forgot. Please forgive me." I felt a weight lift from my chest. Not all wounds could be healed in a single night, but the first step had been taken. The wall that had grown between us had a crack, and sunlight began to filter through. I realized that confrontation did not need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it needed honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to speak truth with love. By the time I left her apartment, I felt both exhaustion and relief. The confrontation had been raw, painful, and emotional, but it had been necessary. I had reminded my daughter of the love that built her, of the sacrifices that shaped her, and she had finally seen the impact of forgetting me. I knew the journey to rebuild our relationship would take time, patience, and continued effort. But the door was open, and we had both stepped through it together.
Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges, though it doesn't erase them completely. In the months that followed our confrontation, Tamara and I began to rebuild what had been broken, slowly, cautiously, and with deep awareness of the pain that had passed between us. We started with small gestures, weekly phone calls that lasted longer than a minute, short visits where we cooked together, laughed together, and sometimes just sat in silence, letting the comfort of each other's presence fill the room. It was nothing grand, nothing flashy, but it was real. Every touch, every shared smile reminded me that love, even when strained, could be reclaimed. We learned to talk about the past without letting it consume the present. She apologized for the absence, for the years she had allowed ambition to distance her from me. The messages left unread, the calls never returned. I shared my hurt, my fear, my sleepless nights. We didn't dwell in blame, though. Instead, we transformed our pain into understanding, using our story as a bridge, not a barrier. I began to see her not just as the woman who had forgotten me, but as the person she had become, someone who had grown, achieved, and learned her own lessons, just as I had. Healing wasn't linear. There were moments when the old sadness would return, triggered by a memory, a holiday, or the quiet emptiness of my house. But instead of letting it consume me, I chose reflection. I reminded myself that forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength. It is the courage to let go of resentment, to open your heart again, to acknowledge that people can change and that love can endure even after neglect. Each day, I felt a little lighter, a little more at peace. The ache that had once taken my breath away became a quiet whisper, a reminder that our bond had survived. Tamara began to take intentional steps to show her presence, to make amends in tangible ways. She included me in milestones, invited me to her events, and shared moments of her life I had previously only glimpsed from afar. Watching her grow into a thoughtful, compassionate, and successful woman, a woman who remembered where she came from, was bittersweet. There was sorrow for the lost years, yes, but also immense pride. I had raised her, nurtured her, and now she had come back to me with awareness, humility, and love. Looking back now, I understand that our journey was never about blame or punishment. It was about reconnection, empathy, and the recognition of the fragility and resilience of family bonds. I learned that even when someone forgets you or distances themselves, the roots of love can remain strong enough to withstand time and neglect. And most importantly,
I realized that sometimes forgiveness isn't a gift for the person who wronged you. It's the freedom to heal yourself, to reclaim joy, and to open your heart without fear. Sitting on the porch on a warm evening, the sun setting behind the trees, I hold her hand in mine. We laugh at a memory from her childhood, share a quiet conversation about life, and let the warmth of our presence speak louder than words ever could. The house that once echoed with loneliness now feels alive again, filled with the simple, profound presence of a daughter and mother, reunited, healed, and aware of the preciousness of time and love. And in that stillness, I whisper to the world and to myself, sometimes forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. Sometimes the bonds you think are broken are just waiting for you to see them clearly, to nurture them again, and to step through the door of love that's never truly closed.